Ahlan wa sahlan, kifkum, and welcome back to the channel. I did spoil the topic of this video in the last video, so y'all knew this was coming. Speaking of which, if you hadn't watched the last video, go do that now, or nothing I'm about to say will make sense. Back? Cool. Now, this is the language overview of Arabic. Before I start talking though, I do have to address how I've been maneuvering the dialect situation today, and I apologize as it will probably get confusing at times due to having to explain multiple dialects. As I studied Levantine Arabic and have the most comfort with it, that's largely what I'll be going off of, although I will explain a lot of Modern Standard Arabic, MSA, as well. I'll try to disambiguate my dialogue and visuals by putting an L in the corner for Levantine, an M in the corner for MSA, and B for both. I'll also be writing the subtitles in Levantine, although I may write an MSA sometimes if it gets too academic for casual speech to handle. This also applies to anything I write on the screen. Without any more waiting, let's go! To start, we gotta find out where the language came from. Arabic, or العربية, is the Central Semitic language in the Afroasiatic language family. Within the Central Semitic languages, it pretty much forms its own branch apart from the Northwest Semitic languages. That split happened in about 2500 BC. After that, the Arabs became a collection of several tribes in and around the Arabian Peninsula. Linguistically though, the language spoken by the Arabs at this time was Old Arabic, which refers to attested or written Arabic from a little after 1000 BC until the Islamic age. It was written in the family of scripts known as Ancient North Arabian, not to be confused with Old South Arabian, which was a South Semitic language group. Notably, Old Hijazi was the language spoken in the mountainous Hijaz region in what's now Western Saudi Arabia starting in the 1st century AD. This is an important dialect because in the years leading up to 622 AD, Islam was founded in that region, and therefore Old Hijazi became the basis for Classical Arabic. With Islam, of course, came the Islamic expansion, during which the earlier Muslims spread Islam throughout the majority of the Middle East and North Africa before the year 750, as well as into the Iberian Peninsula. With the religion, though, they also spread the Arabic language, albeit more effectively to places they settled in. This is why Iran isn't an Arab country. Not enough Arabs settled there to overtake the Persian culture. Where Arabic spread, it got influenced by the native languages there, which led to further evolution into what we now know as the dialects. Modern Standard Arabic didn't really come about until the early 1800s when, due to Napoleon's invasion of Egypt and his introduction of the printing press there was a more urgent need to standardize Arabic in a way that was more modern than classical. The first Arabic newspaper in 1828, Al-Waqa' al-Masriya, probably had the biggest influence on MSA. Today, Arabic is an official language in 25 countries, although 3 of them are disputed, as well as in Zanzibar. It's also recognized minority language in 18 countries. Wherever Arabic is talked about as an official language, by the way, we're talking about MSA. As for the population numbers, the dialects make this a bit tricky. MSA is not spoken as a native language, but 274 million people speak it as a second language, totaling 274 million speakers, and making it the 5th most spoken language in the world by that metric. In terms of native speakers though, all of the Arabic dialects have a cumulative number of 350 million native speakers. If they were actually one language, this would put Arabic in 4th place for native speakers and creates the interesting situation in which you could maybe say that Arabic has more native speakers than total speakers. But since that's not the case, the most spoken dialect of Arabic is Egyptian, with 83 million native speakers, placing just that variety in 13th place worldwide. Levantine itself is in 2nd with about 44 million native speakers, placing it 30th worldwide, and Classical Arabic remains the holy language of Islam. Now I'll talk about Arabic phonology, and I must say, fasten your seatbelts. As far as MSA goes phonemically, it has 28 consonants and 3 vowels totaling 31 phonemes. However, most of the dialects have had numerous sound shifts since then, including Levantine, which has 25 consonants and 5 vowels totaling 30 phonemes. First, about the consonants and of course, the rare phonemes. Arabic has no shortage of them, and this will possibly be the most fun I ever have with this section. First off, the 3 MSA consonants that are missing are all due to mergers that happened in Levantine. Namely, the voiceless interdental fricative tha and its voice counterpart the merged with their phonetic neighbors ta and sa and da and za respectively, while the voiceless uvular plosive qa merged with the voiceless glottal plosive a, also known as the glottal stop. Don't worry though, Levantine Arabic has still retained a bunch. First off, we have the guttural consonants. 2 of them are the voiceless pharyngeal fricative ha and the voice pharyngeal fricative a, which are the 2 sounds most people think of when they think of Arabic. Still in guttural sounds, there's the voiceless uvular fricative kha, but Arabic also has its voiced counterpart gha. Finally, there's the emphatic consonants, which are versions of normal alveolar consonants that are pronounced with your tongue applying more pressure in the back of your mouth. The trick that I've heard for this, I believe in some lang focus video, is to put your mouth in position to say ke, but then say sa instead, or whatever emphatic sound it is. Arabic has 4 emphatic consonants, those being the voiceless alveolar emphatic fricative sa, the voiceless alveolar emphatic plosive ta, the voiced alveolar emphatic plosive da, and the voiced alveolar emphatic fricative za, which is pronounced la in MSA. That's a total of 8 rare phonemes in Levantine Arabic and 11 in MSA. The only other thing to know about consonants is that Arabic has phonemic consonant gemination, which is when a consonant is held for a longer time. This can happen either in the middle of the word as part of a morphological pattern, like in mudarris, or at the end of some words when the last 2 root letters are the same, like khub. We'll talk more about this in the next section so it makes sense. Now we'll talk about vowels, which there are significantly less of than consonants, but they're also more variable. As mentioned, MSA has a basic 3-vowel system of a, u, e, but in Levantine Arabic, a and o were added due to the smoothing of diphthongs like I and aw. Alongside the aforementioned consonant gemination, Arabic also has phonemic vowel length distinction like in talab versus talib. Also, all of the allophones in Arabic are on vowels. For one, if a vowel is next to or even a syllable after an emphatic or guttural consonant, the vowel will move further back in the mouth to match this. This is easiest to see with the a vowel as it becomes a near emphatic consonants, like in the difference between sahel and sarb. Other vowels also get diphthongized a bit, like in the difference between saif and saif. Fun fact, the a vowel is also found in words without emphatic consonants. This includes around ra, like in siyara, but also just in some common words like the casual names people call their parents, mama and baba, and even in the word for God, Allah, as well as any phrases derived from it like yalla, wallah, etc. This leads some linguists to speculate that it'll become phonemic in the near future if it hasn't already and could possibly replace the emphatic distinction. Anyway, the other allophonic system Arabic has is vowel reduction. Here though, it's more specific than just when unstressed, and of course varies a lot by dialect, but the reduced vowel normally becomes or disappears. For one, reduction only happens to short vowels, never long ones, but it's more likely to happen if there's a long vowel in the word. Some examples of vowel reduction are katab, ktab, and katib. Speaking of which, time to talk about Arabic stress rules. The stress depends on the pattern, but to start easy, if there's one long vowel in the word, that vowel is stressed, like in ghazal and shakhna. If the word has only long vowels, then the last syllable is preferred, like in qanoon. And if the word has only short vowels, then the first syllable is preferred, like in nasr, but the mu prefix on a lot of verbal derivations doesn't get stressed, like muttakhad. However, the stress can never go more than 3 syllables from the end. Finally, in the pronunciation section, I won't have too much time to talk about other dialects, but I feel like I should mention the basic dialectal differences that all Arabic speakers are expected to be aware of. Namely, Egyptian and Sudanese speakers say ge instead of je, along with some Yemenis and Omanis. A lot of dialects say ge or ga instead of qa, and Moroccan Arabic has a very aggressive approach to vowel reduction, which is one of the reasons many of their Arabic speakers find it hard to understand. Now we'll find out how Arabic represents everything just talked about in its orthography. Arabic fittingly used the Arabic abjad with 28 letters. In fact, the term abjad itself is Arabic. Also, here's your official government-mandated "it's written right to left" warning. As with other Semitic languages, an abjad works for Arabic since its morphology is based on a root pattern system in which the root or jadr carries the lexical meaning, while the pattern or wazn carries the grammatical meaning. So the vowels are predictable. Since it's an abjad, officially all 28 letters are consonants, but 3 of them are most commonly used as vowel, namely these ones, as waw makes either the wa or u sound, and ya makes either the ye or e sound. Also in dialects, they make the o and a sounds respectively. We'll get back to alif in a minute. In addition to the 28 letters, there are 2 characters that are used like letters but are not considered letters. One of them is a version of ya that doesn't have the dots and is pronounced a feature which is used in some verb conjugations. In fact, I've noticed that other languages that use the Arabic script never write ya with dots because they can do that since they don't have the same grammatical parameters that Arabic does. The other non-letter character is the hamza or hemze, which represents the glottal stop a. It can appear full size at the end of the word or as a diacritic on alif, waw, or ya. Now that I've explained the hemze, I can talk more about alif, the first and most complicated letter of the Arabic abjad. It's technically just a placeholder for vowels, but if it's in the middle of the word with no diacritics, it represents the long a sound, which is pronounced a in Lebanon. By the way, short vowels are not written in Arabic, only long vowels are. In word initial position with the hamza above it, alif can make either the a or u sound, and with the hamza below it makes the I sound. The other diacritical mark specific to alif is the tilde or medde, which indicates that the alif is both hamzad and long, such as in the MSA word for now, ilan. As for other diacritics, there's the dots on many of the letters known as i'jam. These cannot be omitted, they make many very important distinctions between letters. But with the other diacritics, the harakat, those are completely optional and not preferred to be written. The other important thing to know about regarding letters' roles is this thing, which looks like a final ha but is actually a ta marbuta or tied ta. This character only goes in final position, makes the a sound in MSA and a in Levantine, but a if near an emphatic or guttural consonant, and serves a grammatical function which you'll learn about in the noun section. To finish the orthography, I'll explain the stylistic details that you need to know since Arabic writing is very cursive and somewhat complicated. Everything I'm about to say, your keyboard will do automatically, so this is just for reading and handwriting if you're into that. Arabic letters have up to 4 forms they can be written in depending on where they are in the word, those being the initial form, the medial form, the final form, and the isolated form. How distinct the forms look varies by letter. That being said, only 22 of the letters connect to the letter after them, and those are called the connectors. The other 6 letters are the non-connectors, and they don't connect to the letter after them, so they only have 2 forms, the isolated and the final. Also, combinations of lam and alif do some weird stuff. If they're alone, they cross over each other like this, which also happens to be the word for no, la. And if they're attached to something before them, they look like this, like in kilab, dogs. Finally, the word Allah, God, has its own unique shape with decreasing letter sizes and a combination of diacritics that I like to call the crown. After all the hardware, it's time to move on to grammar, starting with the sentence structure, and we have more complications. If someone asks me in person what Arabic's basic word order is, I ask them if they want the short or long answer, so that's how I'll give it to y'all on YouTube. The short answer is SVO, as in البقرة بتاكل العشب, meaning the cow eats the grass. Subject, verb, object. Simple. The long answer is that SVO is used in casual speech in most modern MSA, while in more formal MSA and classical Arabic, the word order is VSO, as in تأكل البقرة العشب, eats the cow the grass. However, if the subject is a pronoun, even in formal settings, you must use SVO, as subject pronouns can't go after verbs, such as in أنا أشرب الحليب, meaning I drink milk. أشرب أنا الحليب is an ungrammatical sentence. That being said, I'd probably just say أشرب الحليب or بشرب الحليب without the pronoun because Arabic is a pro-drop language. As for other parts of the sentence structure, adjectives go after the nouns they modify and supplemental nouns go after the main noun. Cardinal numbers go before their noun with the exception of one, واحد or واحدة, which goes after, and all ordinal numbers go after the noun as well. Questions don't change the sentence structure, although in MSA you could put the interrogative marker hel at the beginning of the sentence. Finally, Arabic uses prepositions which go before what they modify. Now I'll move on to the articles. Arabic only has one article, the definite article al. It's completely uninflected and goes onto nouns and their adjectives as a prefix. In noun phrases with a main noun and a supplemental noun, only the supplemental noun which goes second takes the article. Now, I did say the al is uninflected, but that doesn't mean it never changes. It's a very glaring example of an allomorph, where there's an allophonic system on one specific morpheme. If the consonant starting the word the al is attached to is coronal, meaning that the sound is made with the tip of the tongue, then the l merges with that consonant and geminates. In Arabic class, they teach this using individual letters that do or don't cause the gemination, which are called huruf shamsiyya and huruf amriyya, which literally means solar letters, those that cause gemination, and lunar letters, those that don't. Fun fact, there's a perfect 14-14 split of those groups. The terms refer to the Arabic words for sun and moon, as the sun is ash-shams, which has the gemination, and the moon is al-amr, which keeps the l. But even with the phonological rule about the coronal consonants, there's one exception. The voice post-velar fricative j, which does not geminate with l. The bridge is still al-jisr. Why, you may ask? Because the j sound used to be the voice velar plosive g, which is not coronal, it's dorsal. At least in MSA and most dialects, that's the case. This is actually a very good example of change ordering. Because of this exception to the gemination rule, we can figure out that Arabic's article gemination must be older than the g to j consonant shift, which is why we have the exception. Now I'll talk about the nouns. Arabic nouns are inflected for two genders, masculine and feminine, and three numbers, singular, dual, and plural. The dual number refers to when there's exactly two of something. Anyway, telling a noun's gender in Arabic is pretty easy for the most part, as masculine nouns don't have a special ending like jamil and timsah. And feminine nouns end with ta marbuta like gheme and mahatta. There are exceptions though, like arad, kharab, and shams, which are all feminine but look masculine. Now I'll talk a bit more about ta marbuta, since we have the context of it being the primary feminine marker, but why is it a ta specifically? Well, Arabic isn't a case language overall, we covered that in the last video, but there is the construct case, which affects noun phrases with a main noun followed by the supplemental noun, and the main noun is the one that changes form. This is also how Arabic shows possession for non-pronouns. Most nouns don't change for this, but nouns ending in ta marbuta add a ta to the end, hence the ta marbuta. For example, there's mahatta, station, but then train station is mahattatul itar. It's a thing Semitic languages do. We talked about it in the Hebrew video, but I find it interesting that while Hebrew changes the letter, Arabic has a character for this specific purpose. In addition, if a suffix needs to go on a noun with ta marbuta, then you untie the ta before adding the suffix, making it a normal ta, like in how city is medine, but my city is medinti. One of the suffixes that can get added is the dual suffix, so smooth transition, let's talk about that. The dual suffix is very simple, it's just an for all words, no exceptions. An example without ta marbuta is asad to asadain, and an example with it is batta to battatain. Side note, if that suffix goes into the construct state, the nun is dropped from the end, which would make the above examples asadeh and battate. Now for Arabic plural nouns, which I must warn y'all about in advance because they are all over the place. To start easy, most feminine nouns pluralize with the suffix at, like in siyara to siyarat. Unfortunately, masculine nouns most commonly use some form of a broken plural. Remember earlier when I explained the Afroasiatic root and pattern system that governs Arabic morphology? The plurals use that to the fullest extent, as they often just change vowels from the singular form. Here we have a bit more prescriptivism that makes Arabic harder. Most grammarians will say that to pluralize a masculine Arabic noun, you add the suffix in, but also that 90% of words are exceptions. This isn't a great way to look at it. They should really say that the in suffix, or sometimes un in MSA, is one pattern which goes on agentive words like muhandis to muhandisin, but there are several other patterns as well, which we're about to look at. And nouns that follow this pattern, they pluralize to this, like bet to buyut and alb to ulub, but there's also another way this could go, like kalb to kilab. By the way, don't mix up the last two words, which have MSA pronunciations of qalb and kalb. They may sound similar, but one is a term of endearment and the other is a pretty bad insult. Anyway, next pattern. Nouns that have this pattern, or the last one for that matter, they're similar, pluralize to this pattern like لون to ألوان or شخص to أشخاص. Those two patterns are pretty common, but then there's the type of plural that adds an alif in the middle, like مركز to مراكز and صخرات to صخاري. Then there's this pattern, I'm using 0 to represent any pre-root consonant, like تمساح to تماسيح and إعصار to أعاصير. But the word أستاذ follows another pattern and pluralizes to أساتذتي. That ta marbuta behaves exactly how it would in a singular noun, by the way. Even with all this nonsense, the feminine nouns have exceptions too, as Medine pluralizes to mudun. Not to mention that because of the dialect situation, many nouns have multiple accepted plurals, so if you take a wild guess, you might be right in at least one variety. If you're learning Arabic, I'd honestly just recommend learning masculine nouns alongside their plurals and checking the feminine nouns for any possible funny business. Now about the pronouns, and as you may expect, this varies highly on the dialects, and of course they're more complicated in MSA than in Levantine. To start, here are the charts side by side, and you'll notice the obvious difference that MSA has the dual pronouns أنتما and هما, while Levantine Arabic does not. This is something to keep in mind for the rest of the video actually. Levantine Arabic only has the dual number for nouns. Anything modifying a dual noun is just plural. Now we'll just look at the subject pronouns to see if there's anything important to notice. First off, yes, some of the forms are different in the two varieties, especially the first person plural. But about grammar specifically, in MSA, all second and third person pronouns are gendered except the dual ones. In Levantine, this only applies to singular pronouns. Now we'll talk about oblique pronouns, which all come in the form of suffixes attached to other words. They follow the same distribution as the subject pronouns in both MSA and Levantine. They have three functions. First, as direct objects, these pronouns are attached directly to the end of the verb. For example, I love you in Levantine is بحبك if talking to a guy, بحبك if talking to a girl. They're both spelled the same, so if you're reading it, you have to know from context which one it sounds like. The second function of oblique pronouns is to be used with prepositions. For instance, here's the chart showing all the conjugations of be, meaning of, and here it is for ila, meaning to, like in the direction of. The third function of the oblique pronouns is for possession. They're attached to the ends of nouns to show whose it is. This works for singular and plural, by the way. The oblique pronouns are the same regardless of function, except for the first person singular pronoun, which is ni for the direct object and just e for the other two. Finally, the third person masculine singular object pronoun can be a bit deceiving with its spelling, which is just the ha, but it's pronounced o in Levantine, albeit hu in very formal MSA. Now it's time for the numbers, so here's 1 through 10. Numbers in Arabic are inflected for gender up until 19, after which they aren't gendered anymore. The other interesting thing about the numbers is that their gender agreements work the opposite way from other word classes, as in, the numbers that end with ta marbuta are masculine except one. Also, unlike adjectives, cardinal numbers go before their nouns, but ordinal numbers still go after. By the way, if you're worried about how confusing tu, tnen looks, don't be. Due to the dual number, you'll never actually say it in a sentence unless you're counting. Anyway, we talked about how above 19 numbers stop being gendered, but something else also happens above 19. The nouns being modified by those numbers stop being pluralized. I've talked about this in a video before, so I'll pull the examples from that video. Star is nijme, and stars is nujum. 3 stars is tlat nujum with the plural, but 37 stars is 37 nijme with the singular form of the noun. I should also mention that the Arabic numerals look like this, not what you're probably used to, but they function exactly the same and even run left to right opposite the words, which happens because Arabic 2-digit numbers are said with the ones place first. Now I'll talk about Arabic adjectives. As you may expect, Arabic adjectives agree with their nouns for gender and number, which for MSA includes the dual, and for Levantine does not. In terms of suffixes, the masculine singular takes the zero morpheme, i.e. it doesn't have a suffix. The feminine singular takes ta marbuta, which is of course e. The masculine plural takes in, and the feminine plural takes at. There's also a high occurrence of irregularity among the masculine plural adjectives, just like there is with nouns, although they often have the regular variation as an alternate accepted form. For example, sa'id, happy, in the masculine plural could be either so'ud or sa'idin, and zaki, smart, in the masculine plural could be either azka or zakin. But don't worry too much about that, because Arabic does something interesting with the adjectives here. If a noun is plural, its adjectives will only pluralize if the noun refers to people. If the noun isn't human, then the adjectives will agree to it by going to the feminine singular. For example, small men is رجال صغار, but small houses is بيوت صغيرة. This means that you only have to know irregular masculine plurals for adjectives that commonly describe people, like the two examples from earlier. This rule also applies to pronouns and verbs, by the way. Other stuff about adjectives. Colors follow their own rules pretty much, as they have forms that look like this, using the example of أخضر, green. Or at least the colors not formed from a noun do, because they're also the more recently added colors like benefsaji, purple or violet. The adverbial form of an adjective can be formed by adding the suffix n, although be aware there's no nun written on that suffix, but it's still pronounced like daiman. Finally, a comparative slash superlative slash very form known to academics as the elative form for some reason is made by putting the root of the adjective into this pattern. Using our examples from earlier, they become as'ad and azka. These forms used to agree like other adjectives, but they don't anymore. And we're on to verbs. This is normally the spot where I'd explain the infinitive forms, but I can't really do that here because Arabic doesn't have infinitive verbs. In Arabic, the role that would normally go to the infinitive verb is done instead either by the gerund, masdar, or by repeating the conjugations of the previous verb. Verbs are instead given in the dictionary by their past tense third person masculine singular form, which is how I'll present them as well. I will mention here that verbs in Arabic tend to be way more regular than nouns and adjectives, so we have that to look forward to. But now for more bad news. Arabic has, wait for it, 10 verb classes. Yeah. Thankfully, though, there aren't that many conjugational categories to learn, so it evens out. I'll explain the verb classes using their typical names with the root fa'ain lam, meaning do, which is how they're typically presented, as well as an example verb to show the semantic meaning of the class, which will often be with the root kafta ba, meaning right, since that root is so versatile. Class 1 is the most common and most basic class. It doesn't have a special semantic meaning, and it comes in the form of fa'al, no quirks. An example to show meaning is, as foretold, katab, which means right. Yeah, this class isn't that hard to understand. Class 2 is a bit more on the causative end and has gemination in the middle, as we see with fa'al, and likewise, katab means make someone right. Class 3 describes actions that are at least somewhat reciprocal and has a long first vowel as in fa'al. The class 3 verb katib means correspond with someone. Class 4 is explicitly causative and starts with alif with the hamza in the form of af'al. The class 4 verb aktab means dictate, like tell someone what to write. Class 5 is the reflexive version of class 2, and like class 2, it still has the gemination on the middle consonant, but also has a ta at the beginning, taking the form of tafa'al. The kafta ba root doesn't actually have a meaning here, so instead I'll use the root ain lam mim, which refers to knowledge and information. Ta'allam means learn, and it pairs nice with the class 2 verb allam, which means teach. Likewise, class 6 is the reflexive of class 3, so it has the long vowel in the ta taking the form of tafa'al. The kafta ba root does have a meaning here, as the katib means correspond, but when you're talking about multiple people corresponding with each other, not one person corresponding with others like class 3 does. Class 7 is sort of a soft reflexive, sometimes described as passive, and it's recognized by having a nun as it's the infa'al form. Using the root about writing, inkatab means subscribe, so you'll hear it again at the end of this video. Now we're on to the more niche classes. Class 8 is also reflexive but has the alif at the beginning and the tab between the first two root letters in the form of afta'al. The verb ektatab means copy. Class 9 is extremely rare. It's essentially just the colors and defects mentioned in the adjective section, but as verbs in the if'al form. Unlike class 4, this form doesn't have a hamza at the beginning. The writing root doesn't work here, so I'll use the root for the color green, akhdar, but make it a class 9 verb by removing the hamza, giving us ikhdar, meaning turn green. Finally, class 10 is rather complicated and has semantics that are a bit complicated, so I'll just say it's the istaf'al form, and the verb istaktab is another way of saying dictate. Now that we're past the verb classes, there are three main ways Arabic verbs can be weird. First, remember back in the orthography section when I said that ya has an alternative version without the dots that's pronounced a? This is because if a verb's final root letter is ya, but the verb is past tense and in third person singular form, it's pronounced a, not e, like in the rest of the forms. This is the case with the verb masha, meaning walk. Second, verbs where the second root letter is a wow or ya drop it in a lot of conjugations, like with the verb rah, meaning go, in Levantine at least. The second root is actually wow there. Lastly, verbs with the hamza, wow, or ya as their first root letter tend to use the appropriate vowel characters for whatever conjugation, as is the case with wasal, meaning arrive. Now it's time for conjugation. As mentioned, this won't be ridiculously hard, as if I show one verb class's conjugations, you could infer the rest to some extent. Because of that, I'll limit the verbs conjugated to katab, masha, rah, علم, ساعد, أخرج, and تعلم. The rest of the classes can be inferred using those verbs. First, since I already gave all the dictionary forms, might as well start with the past tense, so here's katab in the MSA chart. But first, about the dialectal difference with the chart so it's easier to conceptualize. For all tenses, MSA has dual conjugations, which Levantine does not. MSA also has gender distinction on second and third person plural verbs, which Levantine does not. And finally, MSA, but more so classical, tends to have a bunch of short vowels at the ends of verbs that makes distinctions which are completely irrelevant in modern dialects. Therefore, I'm going to primarily explain the Levantine chart. Past tense verbs are largely identified by having suffixes but no prefixes. Anyway, notice that 3 of the 5 singular forms are spelled the same way, but only 2 of those are pronounced the same. I wrote and you masculine wrote are both katabt, but she wrote is katbat. Also, the alif ending in the third person plural form is not pronounced. Now for the masha chart, and you'll notice that in most of the forms the ya is still pronounced as e, it's just in the third person forms where it isn't. Now about rah, where the wow as the second root letter actually doesn't appear at all, and in fact it's replaced by a short vowel when not third person, and a long vowel when in third person. Now for the class 2 verb allam, which doesn't really have any extra quirks other than the characteristic class 2 gemination of the middle consonant. Now for the class 3 verb sa'id, where it's the same story but this time with the long first vowel. Now on to class 4 with akhraj, which is still very predictable, and the class 5 verb ta'allam is also predictable. Now we're on to the present tense, which mostly uses prefixes with some suffixes. I'll also start this tense with the MSA chart of katab, but this time I have a practical reason. To form the present tense in Levantine, you essentially take these forms and tack on the additional prefix ba, except in first person plural where the ba becomes ma as an allomorph to match the nasal prefix na. This forms this chart, but the 17 present tense prefix isn't always added. You only add the ba if 1, the verb is actually present tense, which we'll talk about with the future tense, and 2, it's the main verb in the sentence, largely meaning that it's not in the that clause. If either of those conditions aren't met, then the chart will look pretty similar to MSA, although without the dual and feminine plural agreements, just like the past. Anyway, about the actual verbs now. The vowels can be a bit inconsistent even within dialects. You'll also notice that suffixes are used, e for second person feminine singular, and u for second and third person plural. Also, yes, the U masculine and she forms are identical, just deal with it. Now look at masha, and the main effect that the final letter has here is disappearing in the forms with suffixes. For rach, though, we can see why the middle root letter matters. For comparison, here's tar, which has ya as that root letter, different in the present. Now class 2 and 3 verbs follow predictable patterns, so here they are. The class 4 verb akhraj mostly has a vowel restructuring here, and ta'allam is exactly how you'd expect it. Now about the future tense, which is very easy as you just take the present tense form without the ba, and if speaking MSA, add the prefix sa, and if in Levantine, add the word rach beforehand. Finally, for verb conjugations, we got the imperative. The rules for this aren't that hard. Take the second person masculine singular present form of the verb, and then remove the verbal prefix ta. If the resulting word starts with 2 consonants before a vowel, add an alif in front which will match the vowel already in the root. Otherwise, if the resulting word starts with only 1 consonant, the root stands as shown in this chart. Then for suffixes, you do nothing if the listener is masculine, add e if they're feminine, and u for plural. By the way, these are only used for positive commands, i.e. telling people what to do. For negative commands, you just use the appropriate second person present tense form with ma in front of it. So that's it for conjugations. I should mention that MSA also has passive conjugations, which is when the verb was done to the subject by the object. But Levantine doesn't have those, so I won't worry about them. What Levantine does have is passive adjectives, which look like this according to the verb class. They're also active participles, which is the doer, and here are the verbal nouns, or gerunds. Some final things for verbs. The verb for be in Arabic, kan, isn't used in the present tense. It still has a present tense form, but that's just so it can be used in the future, like rakhikun, he will be. Arabic doesn't say am, is, or are. Finally, there's also no have in Arabic. Instead, you use the participle and attach an object suffix to indicate who has the thing. Now for stuff that didn't fit into the above categories, I'll talk about negation. In Levantine, negation is pretty simple. If it's a verb, put ma before it, and if it's an adjective, put mish or mu before it. In MSA, the system's a bit more complicated. To start, you can still use ma if the verb is past tense. If it's present tense, use la instead, and if it's an adjective, the MSA term is laysa. However, there's a more popular way to negate verbs in which the verb is always present tense, but you change the tense by changing the negative particle. In present, it's la, as mentioned, but in past tense, it's lam, and in future tense, it's len. The last thing to talk about is that Arabic has variations in the conjunction that. In both MSA and Levantine, the conjunction used to connect a full clause to a subordinate clause is an, as in ba'araf annak ma'a, meaning I know that you're with her. By the way, as just seen, if the word following an should be a subject pronoun, you instead attach the corresponding object pronoun to it. Meanwhile, the conjunction to connect just an object to a subordinate clause is always illi in Levantine, as in شفت الفيلم اللي سمعتي عنه, meaning I saw the movie that you heard about. By the way, Arabic has pronominal resumption as seen there. In MSA, instead of illi, you'd say alladhi, allati, alladhin, allatain, alladhin, or allawati, depending on gender and number. But the thing about plural inanimate modifiers being feminine singular still applies, remember that. Now it's time for the ritual example sentences we do at the end, both of which will be in Levantine. First up is بدنا نعود إلى الأبراج بكرة. This means we want to go back to the towers tomorrow. First, bid is the verb in quotations meaning want. It's not really a verb, but it kind of acts like one, and instead of subject pronouns, it takes object pronouns to tell who wants the thing. Then, na'ud means we go back or we return. This would often be an infinitive verb, but here it's not because this is Arabic, so instead the present tense is used. Also, notice how there's no mim in front of it. This is because it's not the main verb of a sentence, that's bidna. Next, ila is the preposition meaning to, like in the direction of, and al-abraj means the towers. This is one of the broken plurals. The singular form is burj. Finally, bukra means tomorrow in Levantine, although its MSA meaning is early morning as a noun. The MSA word for tomorrow as an adverb is غدا, with the characteristic adverbial ending. The other example sentence is الأسود قطعت حلقاك إلى 4 قطع. This means the lions cut this cake in 4 pieces. First off, al-usud means the lions. It's the definite article followed by the plural of asad. Then we see the past tense verb ata, but it's not plural. It's feminine singular because lions are not human, unfortunately. Then halka'ke is this cake, singular. The ha is an additional prefix meaning this, which comes from these words. Then we have the preposition ila again, this time meaning like into. Finally, we have the number arba in the feminine form, which for numbers is the one without ta marbuta, and because it's a number, it precedes its noun uta. This is the plural of ita, meaning peace, and it's pluralized here because the number isn't bigger than 19. After all that, قبل هالفيديو قلت ان كنت راح اجعل فيديوين في واحد بسبب موقف الأبجاد. لذلك جعلت فيديوين بداية آمل لأنه كان راح يتضمن الكل اللي كان بدي أحكي عنه، لأن العربية معقدة كتيرا خط بدون لجات. بس أكيد استمتعت من العملية. خطأين الأشياء اللي شكيت منها بالفيديو الأول أثرتني في هالفيديو. تحكوا العربية؟ صححوني في التعليقات، ولكل واحد وافعلوا حبات وان تكتبوا. شكرا للمشاهدة.